Yo, what's going on, guys? Koi here. Today we're going to be talking about traits in Anime Saga, what are the best ones to use, and what are the ones that you should probably not even use at all. Now, first things first, the way that I set up this tier list is we're going to have must-have, very usable, useful, could be better, and then not worth anything. Now, there's going to be a very select few that are not worth anything, but as I talk about each one, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a screenshot of what the trait actually does, so you guys could follow along if you want to do that with your eyes. Now, first things first, there was a major change that was added to the game, such as SP consumption. So now some traits are actually going to be able to save SP pretty much so you don't waste too much mana, but it's a very select few that do this. I just wanted to make sure that we clarify that. There are also some traits that got buffed recent update, and some traits that got nerfed. So we're going to go ahead and talk about these, starting with the Tier 3 variants of Swift, Guardian, and Endurance. First things first, we're going to talk about Swift. Now, Swift got a brand new 9%, negative 9% consumption SP, and a negative 9% cooldown time. Now, honestly, for something that's not even near 10%, not even near 20%, Swiftness 3 should probably get a buff in the future, but as of this moment, the numbers are so low that it's almost negligible at the fact that they're not really going to do much for you, especially the cooldown reduction of negative 9% is just absolutely useless. Let me be real. Next, we're going to go ahead and talk about the defensive trait, which is Guardian. Now, Guardian, on the other hand, is actually quite useful in some cases, but only in the very early game. For instance, we have the negative 12% damage taken, which is just a really nice damage reduction, especially for some moves that do like 50 damage. You're talking about taking a whole like 5 points off or something like that, or maybe even more if the damage is much higher, especially if it's like 90 damage. You're going to be taking off a good 20 points or so, 15 points, something like that. So this is quite nice in the early game, plus that 15% HP increase is really, really nice. But where would I really put this? I would say that this is like too early game to really say if it's going to be incredibly useful. So I could say it could be better. And the only reason I say that is because, honestly, if we're going to be talking about like defensive buffs, the defensive buff should be like 20% or more, at least damage reduction wise, to really make this worth something. Next, we're going to be talking about Endurance. Now, Endurance is probably a fan favorite for a lot of players, especially in the early game that don't have a lot of traits. But let's talk about what it does. So this one actually gives you 12% HP increase and 12% damage increase. Now, on the HP side, this is not like super useful, but on the damage side, this could make your damage go from like 100 damage to 120, like 100 and like 15 damage, 112 damage. It really just depends on the character, because some characters do more damage modifier-wise than others. But any damage trait that is going to give you more damage, especially in a game that requires you to have max level units, is going to be very useful. Besides that, let's go ahead and drop into the legendary traits. And the first one we should talk about is probably Phantom. It is a 4% chance to get, so that's quite nice. But this one gives you a negative 20% consumption on SP, which is quite a nice consumption, bonus. Because, for moves that do like 80 SP, you're talking about taking off a whole like 15 points or so. And this is really, really nice. This is going to save you lots of mana, especially on characters that require a lot of mana usage, especially with that 12% cooldown reduction. But honestly, the 12% cooldown reduction is probably pretty negligible. What I do like about this trait is the 10% critical hit chance, which does increase your damage by 20% every 10% chance that it does hit. So, I mean, this is quite nice. Do I think that the SP consumption really outweighs the damage you could be getting with other traits? Maybe. But honestly, whenever I think of Phantom, I think of highly useful, but not very usable. I think that the negative 20% SP is probably the best part about it. And the 10% chance to do like bonus crit damage is kind of nice. But since it's only like a 20% increase in damage, it's only nice whenever you actually hit it. And it's not hit often enough. It maybe feels like 25%. I would put it a lot higher. 25% crit chance maybe. And then it would be more useful because it would be very usable. But as of this moment, it's kind of negligible because you're not really going to hit that 10% every single time. Now let's go ahead and talk about Draconic. This one's a personal favorite of mine, especially after the buff. Now, the way that this one works is kind of weird because the description is missing a tidbit, which is the consumption rate, but we'll talk more about that in a second. The 15% damage is a nice touch, especially whenever you're trying to get through that early game and you're really trying to scrape up that damage. But you also get, whenever you have greater than, when your HP is less than 30% to 30%, which is that last 30% of HP, you get a negative 40% consumption on SP and a plus 10% damage rate, which increases your damage up to 25%, which is a really, really nice boost. The fact that it already gives you about 15% is very, very useful. But hitting that 40% consumption rate, if you're a dodge master or you're using someone like Gohan and you really just keep abusing the iframes and dodge every boss move, you could possibly get a lot of worth out of this trait at a low HP level. But the higher HP the character has, the better. So this would be more useful in mostly every character in the end game. So I would say this is a must-have, especially if you don't have anything better. All right, next we're going to go ahead and talk about, I believe, Overlord. Now, Overlord is really nice, but it only works in story mode. For instance, you only get a 1% damage increase whenever you kill an enemy, which is quite nice. It also restores 20% HP on kill. Now, this is just a nice bonus, but since there's no use for this in raids, I wouldn't say this is a must-have. I would say that this is quite useful, and in some cases very useful for clearing story, especially if you just want to be someone who wants to clear story as fast as possible. This is going to save you some time. It'll also keep you alive. But again, since it doesn't, since the only thing we're really getting out of this is the damage increase, this is mostly useful for increasing that final bit of damage towards the end game of the level. But I would say this is very useful for story only, but it's useful. Last one is Colossus. Now, for this one, honestly, a lot of people could say this one's quite negligible. The 20% increase and the 15% damage taken neglection is really good, and the generated super armor is okay at best. But the way that this kind of works is more defensive than anything. And I would say that this is usable only in the case that maybe you need a defender or some type of tank on your team to tank that guaranteed damage. You would put your highest HP character with Colossus and really just work off of that. But I guess it really just depends on what the character's using. I would say this is useful, but since it doesn't really give you any damage bonus or anything like that, it's really just there to save you time on trying not to get your high DPS characters killed. But yet again, there are better traits out there that benefit more on you taking damage than anything. And there's really, it's negligible. It's quite negligible. Useful if you don't have anything better, but with that that 1% chance is really not crazy. Now, let's go ahead and break into the mythical traits. And the first one we got to talk about is pretty much Celestial. Now, this one heals nearby allies every 15 seconds, 3.3% HP. That's quite negligible. And when your HP is less than 30%, you take 25% damage taken. Now, honestly, the way that this works, there's really not much use for this trait at all. It could be a lot better, honestly. I would even put it, I'd honestly put it above Guardian, but it could be a lot better. It's borderline not worth anything because that damage reduction is not really going to do much for you. And the healing is super negligible. Yeah, no, I would actually put this in the not worth anything category. It's probably the worst mythical trait out of all the traits, honestly. Next, let's talk about Abyssal. Now, Abyssal is quite interesting. This one gives you 20% increase on HP, 15% increase on damage, restores kills 30% of your HP on kill, and a 10% critical chance, but this one actually makes your damage go up by 50%. So instead of the way that the other one works, this one is quite nice. But yet again, restores HP on kill mostly works only in the case of, story mode. And then after that, you have the critical hit chance. But the critical hit chance is probably the best part. Even if it's a 10% hit chance, 50% more damage is nice, just really freaking nice for anything in the game. So honestly, for Abyssal, I would put it in a must-have trait. Do I think it's better than Draconic though? That's the kicker. I really don't think it's better than Draconic, and I think some people might have an argument with me over that. But if you do, just put it in the comments down below. We'll talk about it. But in my opinion, I don't think that Abyssal performs better than Draconic, just because you don't get that it's not high enough chance for you to be like, okay, I'm going to hit that 50% every single time. It's nice, don't get me wrong. If you don't have anything better, this is a must-have trait. I wouldn't say that it's in the very usable category. I would say this is in the must-have category. Next, we're going to talk about Bloodlord. Now, this one was a fan favorite until it got nerfed a little bit, but we'll talk about it right now. So you get lifesteal, a 1.5% of damage dealt, which is quite negligible because let's say your damage is like in the hundreds on M1, you're only getting a 1.5% back, which is pretty bad. And the cooldown on it is 3 seconds, so that's rough. You do get a 10% HP on kill, but that's negligible as well, especially for a trait that requires you to have less HP to get more lifesteal. But honestly, I would say that this is useful only in very small categories, but since this doesn't have a lot of damage, I would say that this is like in the useful category, but not more useful than most. Very negligible. I would rather have Overlord. I would rather have Draconic, just because they're better traits than this one. So yeah, honestly, Bloodlord could be a lot better, especially after the nerf. This one's quite negligible now. I still think that it has its uses, but with that being the case, I don't know. Honestly, because you don't get any damage, and the restore on kill, not even. I could say after the nerf, this one could be better. Alright, so next let's go ahead and talk about the last one, which is Overlord for the Mythics. Overlord is quite interesting because this one probably is one of the best Mythic traits in the game. Generates super armor every 10 seconds. You got 15% damage, you get negative 15% damage taken, 25% HP increase, and a 20% damage increase, which is guaranteed 20% damage increase, which is quite nice, and a negative 10% SP consumption. Now, I feel like this would be a lot better if the damage reduction was negative 25%, if the HP was like, the HP is great, 25%, I'll take it. If the damage was a lot higher, maybe 25% to 30% to even 50%, especially for a 0.3% chance to even get this trait, the super armor is negligible, and the SP consumption could be a lot higher, could be 25% as well. I could say that this is a useful trait, but in my opinion, this could be a lot better, but definitely top of the could be a lot better area. And some people will be upset because Overlord is such a hard trait to get. You could say that it's a lot better, and the consistent 20% damage is better. But I think that the devs would have to come back and look at this and be like, okay, what does this have compared to Draconic or other ones that are more useful? But, we could put this in the useful, top of the useful category for now. Last one we're going to be talking about is Doombringer. Now, this one probably got the fattest buff out of all the actual traits in the game, and the reason why that being is a 50% crit chance with a 50% damage increase, which is insane. Also, you get, if you take this into story, you get the 1% damage increased every single time an enemy is defeated, and when your HP is less than 40%, you get a 60% damage increase, a 40% damage taken increase, decrease, a 25% cooldown decrease. Now, the only thing that's really missing for Doombringer to be super broken, I say, would be a SP increase. I mean, you get that cooldown reduction. The biggest problem with this, though, is the fact that it would be nicer if with the cooldown reduction you also got a SP reduction as well, because cooldowns are nice, but using up all your mana, especially in a boss fight or in a raids, is very, very annoying, even with low cooldowns. But, if you guys enjoyed the video, hope you subscribe, all that notification bell. I'll see you guys later. Take it easy and peace out.